Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask Kate, brought to you by the Children's Tumor Foundation. Today we're going to be continuing our series of Ask Kate that is focusing in on some of the issues, particularly with NF type 2. As a way of quick review for those who might be joining us for the first time, the Children's Tumor Foundation funds important research for three related but different genetic conditions. They are called neurofibromatosis type 1, neurofibromatosis type 2, and schwannomatosis. Now, despite the similar sounding names, NF1 and NF2 are very different conditions. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about NF2, and in particular, the types of tumors that we see in NF2 that often cause the most significant complications for people who are living with NF2. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we are broadcasting these videos during a very unusual and unprecedented time in our world history. And I am recording from the safety of my home, where I've been sheltering with my family for many weeks. I hope all of you are healthy and safe, and that I wish you all the best. So today let's talk a little bit about the tumors that we see in NF2. The first type of tumor that we see in almost everyone with NF2, but not everyone, almost, is called a vestibular schwannoma. Now, these used to be called acoustic neuromas, so it might be confusing if you saw a doctor and they used that phrase. They are referring to the same tumor, but they now are called vestibular schwannomas. These are tumors that grow on the 8th cranial nerve. These are benign tumors, which means they are not malignant. They do not spread cancer from one part to another part of your body. But because of the location of these tumors, they can be very difficult to treat or to remove, and they will grow over time quite often. Again, not always. Each person will have a different experience that will be unique to them, but often we see them grow, and that's how they often will cause problems with hearing and also balance. That 8th cranial nerve where we find these tumors contribute to hearing and also your ability to balance. And so we'll see loss of hearing as well as loss of function as people have a hard time performing tasks that would normally come easily because of that issue with balance. Now, a schwannoma is a tumor that is growing out of the Schwann cells, which are very specialized cells that wrap the lining of your nerve where it conducts information. So that pathway from one place to the next is wrapped in these Schwann cells. And so what we see in NF2 is we see an abnormal growth of cells in that area, and that causes the vestibular schwannoma tumor. And so that's the first type, most common type of tumor. A lot of times people will have bilateral, which means they'll have one of these tumors on both sides of that 8th cranial nerve, and in some people we see it only on one side. It's often an important part of an NF2 diagnosis, as we heard in our story of the young woman who, that was a big part of them deciding that that was the appropriate diagnosis for her, was discovering those tumors. And so that is the kind of the tumor that we talk the most about, that you've probably heard the most about. But there are a couple of others that we do see quite frequently in people living with NF2. The first one is called a meningioma. These are contained. These are tumors that are kind of wrapped and contained. They are also benign, but they're found in the lining of the brain and the spinal cord. So these will be centralized tumors. We see them in about 80% of people with NF2, but they may not always cause noticeable symptoms. So for one person, there might be an issue of function loss or a nerve response where they become aware of something not working right in their feet or their arms. In another person, they might have many of these tumors that have been seen on an MRI and had no symptoms at all. And in another person, it could be that they're not having physical function symptoms, but they could be having a lot of pain that we think are related to these tumors. So again, it's going to be unique for each individual, and they often can also cause problems such as headaches or blurred vision, and again, weakness or numbness in the extremities, depending on where they're located. But again, many people with NF2 and meningiomas will never require treatment for those tumors because they won't be symptomatic. The third type of tumor we see in NF2 is called an ependymoma. So these rise up from the cells that line the ventricles of your brain. So if you've ever seen an image, like a picture maybe of a brain, there are what looks like hollow spaces inside the brain. We call those the ventricles. And so we see the ependymoma that come out from there. They can also be in the very center of the spinal cord. So these we see only in about 20% of people with NF2, so they're not as common, but they often will require treatment of some kind. These tumors are very different and very unique. They can occur outside of NF2. You don't have to have NF2 to have one of these tumors. We just know that these are the ones that are sort of, in some ways, the hallmark, such as with the vestibular schwannoma, but also just the most common tumors we're going to see in people living with NF2. So again, they're all benign, and so that does, and none of them respond very well to traditional chemotherapy or other forms of treatment that we use in cancer patients. And that is why it is so important that the Children's Tumor Foundation is working hard to fund new research to find effective therapies for NF2 and specifically for these tumors that cause so many problems. So I hope you've enjoyed this today. I know it was brief, hopefully a quick update, refresher, or new information if you're just joining our community. If you have any questions or you want to share parts of your story, I'm always available. You can reach out to me by email or you can leave a comment down below. I love to see you guys interacting with each other, as well as it's a great place to ask me questions as well. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.